Well, good morning, everyone. This is John Adolfi with the Lost World Museum, where we ask the provocative and important question, where do we come from, apes, aliens, or Adam? And today we're going to talk about lie detecting an eyewitness to Noah's Ark. I'm going to give you the full backstory here this morning. Plus, I'm going to show you the exact type of lie detector. I have one. I bought one. The exact one that was used to detect whether or not there was any stress in the voice of the alleged eyewitness. Now, Noah's Ark, for most of you may know, is that legendary ship that is up top of Mount Ararat in Turkey that once held the entire world, in a sense, that had 8 people on board, including Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, and their 3 wives. Those 8 people, along with all the animals that needed to be there in order to be able to get what we got today, were on board that precious vessel. 5,000, actually about 4,400 years ago is when the event took place. The event took a whole year to accomplish everything that it needed to accomplish, unfortunately. But as a result, we are the benefactors of that event. Now, there have been approximately 40 eyewitnesses through the years, last 200 years, that have claimed to have seen Noah's Ark. And we're going to examine one of them. His name is George Hagopian. Now, many of you are probably aware of Ron Wyatt stating that he had found Noah's Ark and promoted it to the point to where the Turkish government took it very seriously and built a visitor center and improved a roadway to get to that visitor center in what they call the Jerupanar site. Now, in spite of the fact that some people believe that this is true, there still remains many eyewitnesses on one real specific area on Mount Ararat, right above the Ahura Gorge, approximately 15,000 to 15,500 feet in a valley, small valley above the Ahura Gorge, on the northeast side of the mountain, overlooking into Soviet Armenia and Iran. Not a very great place to have to go exploring because of the sensitivity, not only religiously, but more so militarily. When eyewitnesses give their report, either they're spot on as one can be, or they may not, their memory may be a little bit faulty, or they're altogether mistaken, honestly mistaken, or they're plain old lying. Now, when you lie, there are certain stressors that are exhibited in our body that, when under a polygraph test, they can many times tell if someone's telling the truth or not. In the 1970s, this type of voice stress analyzer was created to be able to take somebody's voice, whether it be recorded or on TV or live, and put it through it, and its ability to determine whether or not the person is lying based on voice stress analyzer, or the voice stress that it picks up and then records. Let me show you what it looks like. This is called the Detector with a K, okay? And this is what was used. This is what was used when the eyewitness that we're going to talk about, and this wasn't done live. The gentleman that went through this voice test analyzer, I believe it was done through a recording, and then the recording was put through this machine. All right. So he didn't even know that it was being done, which is interesting because then there was no anticipation. You know what I mean? Trying to fool the system or whatever. He just shared his testimony, and then they ran it through this. Now check it out. Here's your little ticket here. Let me pull it up and show you. That little ticket is where the voice stress analyzation results will come about, okay? So now that you saw the machine, let me introduce you to the person who underwent this, unbeknownst to him. His name is George Hagopian. And there's George right there with Elfred Lee. Elfred Lee is a friend of ours and also an artist, and he also interviewed George Hagopian. George Hagopian is Armenian, and he lived in the area that I'm about to share the story with you about. Now, where you can find this story is in two books, one called The Ark File by the same author, and this book, Secrets of the Lost Races by Rennie Nurbergen. Rennie Nurbergen also interviewed George Hagopian, and as a result of his interview, which is in this book, in part, just a part of it, of this book, the results of that stress test analyzer were given. And I'm going to share those with you in just a moment. So the background of George is that in 1902, his uncle decided to take him to show him Noah's Ark. Now, his uncle and his grandfather both had seen it, knew it was there. I mean, it was a cultural thing. Everybody knew it was there, whether they saw it or not, because there were some that did, plus the historical, precedence that was already set. Now, some say that it was, the Bible says it's on the mountains of Ararat. That's true. However, Mount Ararat ended up with that name, and this is where everyone says it is. So there's a very good chance that this is the actual mountain. It's a volcanic mountain. It's quite large. It's almost 17,000 feet tall, or in elevation. And what's remarkable about it is that it stands not among a lot of different, unlike the Himalayas where you have Mount Everest, that's with a whole bunch of other mountains that are kind of like stacked on one another. Whereas this, you have ground level and then you have a massive mountain. Now, I saw that once with Mount Fuji when I went to Japan when I was in the Navy. We were pulling in at around 7 o'clock in the morning. And then all of a sudden you just see this mountain coming out of the flat, the horizon, the ground that you're normally used to. You got the water, the ground, not much elevation, and then you see this massive mountain. It's quite impressive. This mountain is 17 miles in diameter, right straight across at the base. So it's quite large. So to think that you can hide a 500-foot boat up there is, to say the least, easier than you think because of how large this mountain is. Okay, so there it was 1902, and George and his uncle decide to go. It took him 7 days to get to the spot where the Ark was. And I'm going to share with you just a few moments the interview that they did that gives a little bit more detail of it. I'm just going to give you the overview, and then we're going to circle back. And George saw the Ark, stood on top of the Ark, and was quite impressed. Now, he's 8 years old when he first saw it. He went back 2 years later in 1910 and went there again with his uncle and did not stand on Noah's Ark at that time, but observed it. So let's go ahead and head back around, and let's start with the journey. This right here, my friends, is the voice stress analyzer results for George Hagopian. And I will share with you in the end just exactly where he lied or he didn't in his account of seeing Noah's Ark. It said that during the journey, they got halfway with donkey. This is his words. My uncle carried me. So for a few days, they did that on his back. So the story goes is that his uncle had the provisions and his little nephew and carried both. And I'll tell you what, is that possible? That's a lot of weight, you would think. I'm telling you something. We were down in Peru, and we were going from one place to the next with a guide. And I had my suitcase with me, a small one, but it still weighed probably 20, 25 pounds. And I had my camera equipment. Well, the distance that we had to travel, and I'm not a lightweight, but it was getting exhausting. Plus we were up, thousands of feet in the mountains. So that had an impact on us. This gentleman was younger than me, but he looked weathered. Is the best way I could describe him. He looked older than he really was. He was in his late 30s and smaller than me, well-built, thin. And he picked up my suitcase and just traveled all the way to where we had to go, which was quite a distance. I was so impressed by it. So, when you've got somebody who does this all their life, living in the mountains, they're hardy, and it doesn't surprise me that he was able to carry George and some of the provisions that they needed to the Ark. So they get there, and he said, and this is his words that were put through the voice analyzer: "When I saw Noah's Ark." When I saw Noah's Ark. Was there any stress in this particular part? Absolutely not. He was telling the truth according to this. He said, and questions were given to him. Was this in 1902? He said, yes. He said, how often did you see it? He said, twice. And again, no stress at all. If we knew how to read this, that is. But the experts stated that there was no stress in his voice. When they got there and they looked at it, he said that it looked like pure stone. So apparently there's some petrification that had taken place with the Ark. And he said that not anything got through. Again, not anything got through. What is he talking about? His uncle took a gun that he had with him and shot the Ark, and it didn't penetrate the Ark. And then they asked him, did you see any nails, any nails in the Ark? That's the bottom one right there. And he said, no. He went on to say that there were wood pegs that you could see, but there was no iron, any nails, at least on the outside. He said, what color was the wood? And he said, it was green, meaning that there was moss on it. And he said, was there any snow on it? He said, just a little bit. And again, absolutely no stress, according to the analysis that was done on the stress test analyzer. So that's the basics of the story. George had a very remarkable life. After he saw Noah's Ark at the age of 10, and let me show you the illustration. In 1970, illustrations, he spent time with archaeological illustrator Elfred Lee, who had been to the mountain in 1969. They found wood with Ferdinand Navarra in another area, not the area that he said it was in. And Alfred spent 18 months with him on and off, interviewing him and drawing his memories. This is what Hagopian said that it looked like. Now, this could either be a little boy's recollection, or it could be a giant antediluvian cubit that was used to measure the Ark in the Mosaic account in Genesis. Because the Ark is supposedly anywhere between 450 to 600 feet long, depending on the size of the cubit. Okay, George Hagopian, when he got on top of that Ark and looked, he said it looked like it was 1,000 feet long. 1,000 feet long, he said. Now, if a giant, someone twice as tall as we are today, were to measure their cubit, it wouldn't be 18 to 20 inches. It would be 3 feet to 40 inches. And that would check out. I'm not sure if it is 1,000 feet long. I have a tendency to think that it was maybe closer to 600 feet. But it could be 450 feet with the 18-inch cubit, the Hebrew cubit. We'll find out. When he gave this depiction to Alfred, he told him about the windows at the very top, as does Genesis. And the hull itself was rounded on the edges. Now, a lot of people, when they draw it with a corner. But when you dovetail and create a corner that is rounded, There's more technology involved with that kind of construction. And apparently it was important for the boat, if you want to call it a boat, a barge more so, to have that. Now you're probably wondering about the stairs. I did for the longest time till I got clear on that. Those stairs were put there after the fact. Here's a close-up of it. And there's little Georgie being hauled up there by his uncle. They piled a bunch of stones. Then his uncle, who's about 6 feet tall, put him up on his shoulders and then lifted him. And he was able to get to the first step and then trotted right up there on the ark. When he went back 2 years later, the ark started to have some snow on it. And that's what it looked like when they went back 2 years later. Now, is he telling the truth or is he a liar? The entire analysis that we shared with you today, there wasn't a moment where he was lying. There was no stress in his voice necessarily. The only time there was stress in his voice is when he was trying to figure out the measurements, where he said it was 30 feet tall. And he used the word foot, but he thought, but the person that analyzed this said he probably meant meter. And so there was kind of like a stress in trying to figure out which unit of measurement that he really meant. So there you have it. That's one credible source in my mind, based on not only this test right here, but also Alfred, who's suspicious enough to investigate to see if whether or not somebody really saw something or not. His story was consistently told over and over again, with the details that Alfred was able to pull out of him during their 18-month on and off interview over the course of 18 months from 1970 to 1972. So yeah, there's more to this story, but for now, we're going to end it here on that. I will make one offer, and you guys are going to be able to see the link right down in the description, and that is a 2-page report. And there's Alfred Lee interviewing another eyewitness in 1986 called The 3 Top Reasons Noah's Ark Must Still Exist. And you can get that by going to museumalerts.com. You'll see that down in the description. This is free, okay? Free. And you won't find this anywhere on the internet, and it's all yours. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time on the next YouTube Live.